he comes to me, oh, did you finish that, Pilar? Finish that? And I said, I'm still learning. Can you not just give me enough time to do it? And I said, so since then, when I went to his boss or his supervisor, he won't do it anymore because it's too much. I said, oh, see, I noticed the difference now, Steve, that I don't go to bully me or finish this or finish that. I mean, I'm only learning. So I said, if you want me to learn, give me time. But now he gave it back to the other employee to do it now because I couldn't what's that? I couldn't put up in my head because it's too much very fiddly thing to do, and you have to make sure that this one she got 75% of this and this one 26%. It's all percentages in their what's that? In their income and expenses. What's that? So I said, oh, this is very. And I said, I know how to do it, but you just give me time. But he didn't give me time. So I said, I had enough. I mean, I can retire now. I don't have any headache, and I had headache all the time. You know, you can feel it in the
So
neck.
that's according to blood pressure equals to
So I said,
I'm
not young to what's that? I said, it's not that I don't want to do it. Just give me time. But now I couldn't stand him. He's too what's that? He's very demanding. Like he wants you to do this straight away, and I couldn't stand him anymore. And besides, 5 employees already left our section because of him. Since he became our manager there. Glenda left, Rhonda left, all this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
that's the reason.
but was it rectified at the end?
It was rectified because
okay, so that's good. So that's the main thing. So the hazard was rectified.
To his supervisor, and then I said to his supervisor, I have told his supervisor, if you don't do anything about this, I'll make a report about him in detail. That as he's not a good manager, and I'll give it to the director. This is the higher up.
Yeah, so it was solved.
It was solved now.
Okay.
This is better.
That's
so
good.
He came back to me. He talked to my supervisor, and then he came back to me. Oh, from now on, Pilar, you just do what you wanna do. Do this, those ones that you've been comfortable with. Just do it. That's what's that now? She says to me. So which is good.
That's
I was
good.
relieved after that because you know what I mean. I'm not that. It's not that I'm very old. I can do it, but just give me time. But he doesn't give me time. You know, every morning. It's not only me who's complaining, the other one who's left, he's already complained.
Yeah,
How come
okay,
it's like that?
So it wasn't good, but at least it was solved at the end. So the moral of the story is that if you do have a problem, that you need to report it and get it solved, because you can't live in a working environment and that will create hazards.
Because he says to me,
your mental,
if you have some problem, go to see Danny about it, my supervisor.
Good,
So which I went to him. But
should always be reported.
But
absolutely.
But before I reported him to the assistant director first, before I went to him. And I said, oh, well,
at least it was solved. That's awesome. That's good. And you, Kevin, anything that you want to add to psychological or?
Well, in my day when I was working, we didn't know what bullying really meant at the time, but I learnt later that's what's causing me most of my depression. The doctor told me.
Through your bullying. So what type of ways that you thought that they didn't bully but they did? So did they call your names?
They used to call us and we wasn't going fast enough, and they push and shove you around and all that, and throw sawdust down the back of your neck.
Oh, that's not appropriate. That was
And well, we didn't understand bullying in them days.
So that's why you didn't have any. You couldn't speak up for your rights at that time.
Not really. They wouldn't listen. No one would listen to you in days.
But now in these days that they have to listen to, because there's also a complaint form that you can always fill out and go through that procedure. Every workplace is different. But it's good that you have that. Yeah, so that's good. So chemical hazard is also another hazard. So gas, liquid, fumes, dust, chemicals. It should always be labelled properly. Make sure that there's big labels, danger, do not drink, make sure it's out of reach. Because chemicals can cause burns, and it can also, for breathing difficulties, if you can't breathe without a mask, etc. So chemicals is also important with vapors. So that's also hazard. Okay, so now the first thing that you need to look at, okay, so hazard is anything that has potential to cause injury or illness, but now we have to look at risk. Risk is the likelihood that a hazard can occur. So risk is a likelihood that a hazard can occur. So hazard in itself it can cause potential injury, but risk is how likely will it occur? Is it a high risk? Is it a low risk? Is it a medium risk? Can it cause injury or illness? So we're trying to look at that arising from the exposure to the hazard. is how likelihood would you get injured. So that's a difference. There's a difference between hazard and a risk. It's not the same thing. People think it's the same, but it's different. Hazard can cause injury, but the risk is what is the possibility? How severe can it cause this illness or injury? So the first thing that the most important thing that you need to do is the first thing, in order to eliminate hazard, and that's the goal of every workplace, is to eliminate hazards. We need to reduce these hazards in the workplace. That there'll always be hazards, but we need to find ways to get rid of as much as possible. We need to identify our hazards. So every time you go to any place that you go to, first thing you ask, okay, what hazards are in this workplace? And so hazard identification, which we looked at. Again, then you have risk assessment. So you assess risk. That's where how severe, how frequent would this hazard occur, and how much exposure, how intense is the exposure has been done to this hazard. So for, noise, how high is it? And then once you've done that, so once you've identified hazards, once you've assessed how high, what priority is this risk, how likelihood it will happen. So if you have cables, how likelihood would someone trip over, so a tripping hazard or a manual handling hazard, how likely would someone have long-term injury because of, manually handling equipment. And also, once we've done that, you need to control it. We need to find ways to eliminate it. And there's 5 ways, a hierarchy of ways that we can control and eliminate risks. So the first one is always, which is the one that we should always have, is elimination. Elimination is very, very important. How can we get rid of it? That's the thing that we need to get. We don't need it. We need to try and ways to eliminate. If you can't eliminate a risk, then you go to substitution. And that's the second one, substitute. So you substitute for something that poses less risk. So maybe, for example, chemicals, you might choose another chemical in your workplace, so if you're in a science lab, that poses a less risk than another chemical. So try to substitute a chemical, that's one way. And the third way is engineering. So engineering means that instead of manually handling activities, you can use a mechanical equipment. So you're mechanically changing the equipment. So you're engineering the equipment to make sure, or putting a barrier into place to protect you from the hazard. So putting a barrier, that's an engineering control. Putting a barrier so that makes sure that you're segregating yourself from the hazard, or you're, mechanically. So for example, if you need laptops, in classrooms we need laptops. So instead of just picking up the laptops and just carrying from one room to another, there's now laptop trolleys. So you put all the laptops in your trolley and you just move it around. So you put as many laptops versus manually carrying it. So that's one way, that's an engineering control. And the fourth one is administrative control. And administrative is training, is one way. Training is very important. How you need to make sure that you understand, where you work, understand how everything goes. That's part of the induction process, and also make sure you understand equipment, every type of equipment that you use, because if you use a new equipment, you have to know how to operate it, so you know what happens in an emergency. So training is very, very important. And fifth one, which is the last resort, is personal protective equipment, which is PPE. So it provides protection, but it doesn't eliminate. And PPE is your gloves, the boots that you said, the hard boots, the vest that you have, goggles, and also earmuffs. So they should only be used as a last resort, because you have to use them anyway, because they provide protection, but they won't in itself eliminate risk. So that's a hierarchy. So every time you have a hazard, you always go, once you've identified it, you identified your hazard, you found out your risk, you also how you control it through elimination, substitution, engineering, administrative, and personal protective equipment. So there are 5 ways to control it. Now what we're going to look at is the assessment task, which is on a case study, and it's about a tuna boat incident, and it's dealing with a work experience student, how they have different rights to other employees that have been working there for a while. So the first thing we're going to do is actually read the case study, and then we can go through the questions. There's 5 questions. So maybe we can volunteer someone to read one, or we can read a paragraph each. So I'll start off. We'll read a paragraph each. The first one is, Andrew, a Year 11 student, had an interest in aquaculture and arranged to do his work experience with a tuna farm to see how the fishing industry operated. So on his first day, he wants to read that paragraph.
On his first day, Andrew was doing jobs like untangling and mending nets. later in the day, he helped clean one of the vessels and do other general tasks.
Yep, you want to read that, please?
On the